chapter 35, Isaiah chapter 35, beginning with the very first verse. We're going to look at the path of life, the path of life today. It is so easy to be misdirected. Even a GPS, that system that hasn't been updated, can get you lost. There is a guide that walks side by side with us. And he doesn't need information from a satellite to keep us on course. He knows every valley we go through and every mountaintop we achieve, because he is our paraclete. The Greek says he is our side-by-side friend. He never walks ahead of us. He never walks behind us. He walks lockstep with us, parallel, side by side. What a joy it is to know that we are not alone. What a joy it is to know that I'm not dependent on my sense of direction, because he guides us through life. I heard a preacher tell a story from his childhood. He was about 15 years old. His dad worked part-time for a mortuary. And the funeral director sent Dad to Detroit to get a new hearse. And so as they drove, the preacher said across country he would roll out his sleeping bag in the rear compartment of the new hearse. And he says one day when Dad was passing an 18-wheeler, he said, I waved at the driver. And the driver of the truck was so shocked and shook up that somebody was waving at him from the rear of the hearse. He says he locked his brakes down, the wheels were smoking, and that truck skidded to a stop. He says the last I saw of him, he was on his knees by the road in the position of prayer. The roads of life can cause and create and carry us into some unusual circumstances. But as long as we are walking with God, we will have a guide. You know, there's a difference between guidance and a guide. Guidance is information. A guide is a person. And a person that goes with you wherever you're going. I want us to see three things from this chapter, and I'll read through it as we go. First, I want us to see the path that God leads us on allows for problems. You ever heard this idea that once I become a Christian, then my life becomes a flowery bed of ease and everything is worked out for me and I have everything I need and all of my sins are taken care of and all of my problems are taken care of and I am just happy-go-lucky? Well, you and I both know that that's a lie straight out of hell. Because even the path that God guides us on allows for problems. Look what these first 4 verses say. The wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as a rose It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it. The excellency of Carmel and Sharon, they shall see the glory of Jehovah and the excellency of our God. Strengthen ye the weak hands and confirm the feeble knees. So the first thing we see is that this path allows for problems, but it is the splendor of God that we focus on. The Israelites in this chapter were being, this chapter rather focuses on when the Israelites would return to Zion. They were in captivity. They were suffering many things, and but the prophecy says that there's a day coming when you will return, when the redeemed will return to Zion. The prophet says, even in captivity, there's a rose in Sharon. He says, even in captivity, the beauty of Carmel shall be seen. Even in captivity shall the blossoms of the rose be beautiful. So whatever the problem is, whatever the detour is, whatever the struggle is, understand that you're not there alone. Sometimes you might feel like it. Sometimes the comments that friends and family make indicate that you are. But if you are a child of God in the midst of your captivity, in the midst of your crisis, your chaos, wherever you are, God is there. The path allows for problems because we are mere men and women, and Jesus says, in this world, you will have problems. But be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. And so the path allows for problems, but when we focus on the beauty of God, we can get through the problems. We can walk through what we're going through, because we know where we're going to. He says the path allows for problems. He says in verses 4 through 7 that the path affords protection. I think the most difficult part of any solo mission trip is the fact that it's solo. You know, to be in a place where most folk don't speak your language and where you don't speak the language and where there's nobody in that place that knows you personally. It's a place that seems to make us vulnerable, but on the path that God leads us on, there is protection. I never shall forget, I've shared this story before, but in the city of Bangui, Central African Republic, I was in this adobe-type hotel building, and it had a thatch roof, and it was a very small room, and it had a window, an exterior window in the bathroom, and I was trying to sleep there, and there was continual cigarette smoke drafting into the window. I mean, to the point where it was as though I was doing the smoking in the room. And so not only did I smell the smoke, but I heard something outside the window and decided that I needed to go check it out. Now, I was alone. So I decided I'd take two things as I opened that door, my flashlight and my pocket knife. But before I grabbed either of those, I prayed to the God of heaven. Lord, I don't know who's out here or what's out here, but number one, they got to stop smoking under this window. And I walked out. As I said, it's a small building. I simply turned and to my left and looked down the side of the building, and there was a man seated in a chair with his feet propped up against the fence, a block wall, and his back was to the back of the building, and his head was just beneath the bathroom window. And I shined that light in his face. And in English, I said, "What are you doing under my window?" And he was so afraid. He was trembling. He dropped his cigarette. He said, "I work for the hotel. The manager told me there was a man of God from America in this room. And I was to sit here and make sure no one comes across the fence and harm him." Whew! You talking about a sigh of relief. Smoke your cigarette, brother. We are not alone. God protects his own. And he can change anything. No matter how bad the situation looks, God can change it to your good. He says, the path affords protections. Let's read those verses. He says, "Say to them that are of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, even God with recompense. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened." God can change anything. "And the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped." God can change anything. "Then shall the lame man leap as a deer, and the tongue of the dumb sing. For in the wilderness shall waters break out, and streams in the desert." God can change your desert to a river. God can change your darkness to life. God can change your sickness to health, because God can do anything. Verse 7, "And the parched ground shall become a pool, and the thirsty land springs of water. In the habitation of dragons," actually that word is jackals, or something similar to a coyote. He says, "Where each lay shall be grass with reeds and rushes." It says God provides whatever we need, wherever we are, whenever we need it, and however much we need. God says that in the worst of times, I can show you the best. He says in the hardest times, I can make it easy. He says in the darkest times, I can shine a light. In the sickest times, I can make you well. Because he is God that can do anything but fail. He says, the path allows for problems. The path affords protections. Let's look now at these last 3 verses of this chapter, and we shall see that the path that God leads us on allocates prosperity. You know, when we're walking with God, the world says you're wasting your time, you're wasting your money, you're wasting your talent. The world says, come on over to our side. but God says, if you're on the path that I want you on, there shall be prosperity. It might not look like it at times, but prosperity is on the way. It might not feel like it at times, but prosperity is on the way. God says the path will have its problems, but the path will have its protections, and also the path will lead to prosperity. One of the joys that I've learned from walking with the Lord is that we're not waiting on prosperity in the sky by and by. God gives us prosperity every day. There are signs every day that God is blessing us over and abundantly more than we deserve. Every day, not some days, most days, every day. Because He is God. And He can do anything. Those last three verses says, and a highway, a roadway, a pathway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. That straight and narrow path the New Testament talks about. Few will follow that path. But he says it's a highway, it's a roadway, it is a pathway, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for those, the wayfaring men, though fools shall not err therein. He says this road, you'll not find any selfish people on this road. He says, on this road, you'll not find any evil people on this road. On this road, on this highway, on this byway, on this pathway, he says, there shall be holiness. No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast shall go upon thereon. It shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. God has a path for you and for me. And though there be problems, he says there's protection and there's prosperity. And he says the most fierce, the most ferocious animal of the jungle, he says, cannot hurt you. You see, he's describing a picture of a roadway that's leading through a forest, and with all of its various animals. But there, on that roadway, we can walk down that road, and lions and tigers and bears cannot harm us, because our God is leading us. He says in verse 10, and the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee from them. It sounds like that passage in the Revelation that says, in that place there'll be no more crying, and no more dying, and no more tears, and no more sun, and no more death, and no more sickness, and no more sorrow, no more weariness. He says, when we follow the path that God has for us, we have a prosperity that belongs only to those that walk, that travel, that traverse God's sacred highway. And so the question is this morning, are you on that road? Are you following Christ? Are you allowing Him to be your GPS? Are you allowing Him to be your guide? Are you allowing Him to lead you through the valley of darkness? You see, we each should surrender our own self-sufficiency and rely totally on God himself to fix our problems, to provide us protection, and to offer us prosperity. Because he is the God who is real. There are a lot of gods in this world. Some are made in Detroit. Some are made right here in Augusta, Georgia. But there's but one real God. And his name is Jehovah. He is the God who is real. He is the God of the Trinity. He is the God that is called the Most High God. He is the God that is the living God. He is the God that is the Almighty God. The God that is the Lord God. The God that is Master God. The God that is the present God. The God that is our provider. The God who is our healer. The God who is our banner of victory. The God who is our peace. The God who is our righteousness. The God who is our rest. Lions circling around us. But we have rest because Jehovah is our God. Doesn't matter what you're going through. Give it to God. Doesn't matter what the doctors have said. Give it to God. Doesn't matter what the attorney has said. Give it to God. And he'll fix it. All we've got to do is trust him. And that's easier said than done. But trusting him is the key to our prosperity.